Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. Now a quick caveat, this is a very tongue-in-cheek video and not to be taken over seriously. These are two types, or the main two types of paint pots you're going to find out there. The dropper bottle on the left and the Games Workshop pot on the right. Dropper bottle, little screw off lid, paint goes inside, you squeeze it out, I'm sure you've seen them all. And the Games Workshop ones with a solid flip top lid where you've got to use a brush or other implement to get the paint out from underneath. Now the Games Workshop pots get a lot of hate. I'm going to redress that balance today and pour some hate on dropper bottles mostly. Now bear in mind I do believe they're just as bad as each other, but this is a bit of fun. Now this footage is taken right from September 2023 all up to the current day. Essentially you'll see my old projects in the background, and anytime I had a real problem with a pot I thought I'd film it. So you saw that first one there, a red paint, absolutely jammed and crusty, and here we're going into a yellow paint, jammed and crusty and horrible. And this is mostly my fault for not cleaning it before I put it away, but I'm going to show you the problems you can have. Look at that, getting a toothpick there and peeling off that horrible gunk from around the pot. You can see paint bubbling out. It's a bit grim. Now, so another point, this is a Flames of War paint pot. I've not played Flames of War for about 15 years, so this paint has actually lasted incredibly well. And if I'd have taken care of it, cleaned it up like you see in here at the end of every kind of session, made sure I'm not letting any excess paint get into the top, I probably wouldn't have had that problem. And this is the other point, if you ever have a massive issue with the paint, you can clean it up. But look at all the paint wastage I'm getting on that cloth. Sticking that bit of tissue into the nozzle there to try and get some of that excess paint out. I could have probably painted an entire Imperial Fist Space Marine with what I'm wasting on this paper. This isn't a problem you get with a Games Workshop pot because the lids are nice and wide and open. It doesn't bubble up, it doesn't whatever. We'll go through some of the issues later. Now again, here we've got a nice bone white, one of those popular colours, and the paint has managed to dry in the nozzle because I, user error, didn't tap it on the painting table and make sure the paint ran out of the nozzle, so it's my own fault. But again, a problem you wouldn't find with the Games Workshop pot. This one's an interesting one. Look at this, it's all dried around the top and it's made a little crusty kind of lid effectively around that nozzle. So again, wouldn't happen with a Games Workshop paint pot. Give it a clean up, make sure I treat it. Now here we go, a very rare problem with a Games Workshop paint pot. Come across here, look, I've nearly emptied this Retributor armour here. But look what's happened. A little bit of paint has built up around this lid and it's going to stop it setting and closing properly if I don't deal with it. So a bit of a toothpick and look at that, nice and easy to clean up that paint pot and it'll close again perfectly. Now, jokes aside, I do genuinely believe that I waste less paint from a Games Workshop pot because you can use it right up until the paint is completely exhausted, and I do think I personally waste less as I'm going through. Here we are, this is the reverse of what we saw on the red paint pot. And look, little plug of paint in the end of that there that I can peel out. Now it looks like at the moment I'm painting some Necromunda figures, I think, on the base there. So you can see this is all through this period of months. The same painting session. This one found a problem with the black. You look there, very, very near the end of the pot there. And again, a crusty little bit of paint that's dried around that paint lid and will stop it closing if you don't clean it off. Nice little cement there. And that's the kind of key issue with whatever type of pots. Bit of a joke this, but if you don't take care of any type of paint pot as you're painting, as you're working, keep on top of the cleanliness of it, tap the air out of the nozzle of the Vallejo paints, make sure the rim of the Games Workshop paints are clear, problems will happen. Look at that, a little plug of paint at the top, squeeze it, spurts everywhere. Here's another one. I'm right near the end of this bone white bottle with the Games Workshop pot, trying to get the last dregs out, and a bit of air obviously got trapped and it bubbled and spat paint everywhere. Does not happen with a Games Workshop paint pot. Now, I know you'll say, well, you can knock a Games Workshop paint pot over, it's a lot easier. Yeah, you can, but just don't, and you won't have the problem. Here we are, look, another one, and this is the thing with these Vallejo paints. If you don't clean them before you put them away and waste a tiny bit of paint, you're going to waste a lot of paint if you've got any air trapped in that nozzle. So, yeah, another example there. And look at this. Fun thing, I suppose. You do get to clean out your paint pots and get a bit of a laugh playing with crusty little bits of paint that have managed to dry in that paint lid. Now, what does anyone else do to keep keep their paint clean and make this not happen as you're going along? Doesn't happen often. As I said, this is 9-10 months of footage, and every time I have a problem with the paint pot, I thought, oh, this will be a laugh, stick it in. And it's time to now really unveil this video because I've gathered up all these little bits of footage over the last sort of probably approaching a year and thought, right, let's finally release this video. Look, cleaning it out there. Remember, with any of these, it is really how you take care of your paint that actually matters, like with any equipment. Now here's a yellow. This is actually a brand new yellow. You saw my Flames of War yellow. It was finally time to replace it. I have never in 25 years of doing dropper bottles actually seen this happen. The actual pot was really nice and clean. a little bit of paint has obviously got in there and dried, and there must have been a fault in the actual construction of the pot, because when I've screwed the lid back down, it's actually managed to pop the top of the lid off. Anyone ever seen that before? Never ever seen that in, like I say, 25 years of using this style of pot. Maybe not 25 years, maybe a bit less than that, but an awfully long time anyway. Anyone ever seen that happen? Very, very strange. And I am at some point going to have to, when I've finished using a full pot of paint, I have to clean up a lid and use this, because I'm still using this yellow paint. Hasn't really affected the utility of using it, but just a really, really weird one. And definitely one that can't happen with a Games Workshop pot, because they're not built like this. But again, look at all those little bits of crusty yellow paint that's coming out of there. So here is my proof that I can get to the end of a Games Workshop paint pot without wasting it, without spilling it and having no mess. Now, this is a shade, which is a little bit easier to keep the rims clean, but brand new pot of sepia shade that I'm just opening there, and I've got down and through the entirety of the previous sepia shade. I don't really ever have problems using all the paint in the Games Workshop pot, and as luck would have it, I didn't knock this over at any point during it, and just for fun, that's what was left in the pot when I upside downed it. So there we go, offer that to the gods of the paint there, and clean it up and get going. So it's science time now. This is what I'm currently using, so I'm currently painting some more Nurgly Death Guard in a totally different paint scheme, moving away from some other Death Guard pieces. I thought I would implement science and go through all the paint pots that are on my bench at double speed, check them for, do they need a real good clean up, are they a bit manky, am I having some problems, putting the ones that I really could do the clean up on the left, the ones that are absolutely fine on the right. And in this case, in this paint scheme, actually I'm using more Games Workshop paints than I am Vallejo, and that's not really normal. I didn't set this up, honestly, it just happens to be in this case it's better. Now look at that, opened up a perfectly pristine gunmetal silver there, and the paint started spurting out the top. Now it's very hot at the moment, so probably actually a little bit of the air pressure inside that pot's got a little hot and forced that out. Put pile them to the left. Now Games Workshop did get a bit of a buy here, because there's a lot of washes in my Games Workshop set I'm using here, and eventually I think, right, well actually you need to ignore those and think, they don't really count, let's count up proper paints. So going through, there are some Vallejo paints that are in perfectly good condition. See there, the yellow that we've used before, absolutely perfectly good condition, but that lid is still a bit faulty. So with the application of science, what are the final results going to be? Out of the paints on my table, what needs cleaning up, what's in bad state, what's doing weird things like that, paint bubbling out the top again, I am putting this down to temperature. It's a very, very hot couple of days in the UK at the moment. How many are going to be faulty out of these Games Workshop versus Vallejo paints? So when we get to the end, we're going to see. Now I say faulty, it's not faulty, clearly. I haven't cleaned them up properly before putting them away, or it's a hot day. There's always going to be reasons. Again, this is tongue-in-cheek. I don't hate either of these paint pots. This is just my counterpoint to the fact that people pour a lot of hate on Games Workshop paint pots, and they're not bad if you take care of them. And that's the thing we have to consider. Taking care of our hobby products, whatever they are, is always a sensible idea. Gives you longevity, gives you whatever. So clean them up before you put them away. Make sure there's no air stuck in them. All that kind of malarkey that you would sort out. And the other thing to remember is the "for me" statement. People say, I much prefer Vallejo pots, for me. Some people say, I prefer Games Workshop paint pots, and it should be for me. What you prefer is a very personal choice. Now, here's the science part. So mathematically, we had 5 dodgy Vallejo paint pots out of 8. We had 4 dodgy Games Workshop pots out of 12. So a 62% failure rate for Vallejo, a 33% failure rate for Games Workshop. Conclusive science. See you all again.